that better?
Yes. Everyone needs to stop talking.
So, pursuant to the second-class township code, this is a lawful special meeting by the Board of Supervisors with proper notice provided under the Sunshine Act. As this is an official meeting, I want to remind everyone.
They can't hear you in the back, they're yelling.
Turn it up.
Can you hear me any better? I'll start over. Pursuant to the second-class township code, this is a lawful special meeting of the Board of Supervisors with proper notice provided under the Sunshine Act. As this is an official meeting, I wanted to remind everyone that this meeting is subject to the guidelines outlined in Newberry Township Public Meeting Policy, which is available on the website. Under Public Meeting Policy, I wanted to highlight a few critical provisions for this meeting. Citizens offering to make public comments or add their names to the sign-in sheet provided at all public meetings. Did everyone see the sign-up sheet at the door? Did everyone get a chance, that wants to speak, sign up?
No.
Okay, well, everyone that wants to speak, get your name and address on the sign-up sheet. Only residents and taxpayers of the township are provided the right to publicly address the board during public comment periods. Although the board may, in its discretion, permit non-residents or non-taxpayers to provide public comment. Citizens shall speak only once on a topic until all other citizens identified to speak on the topic are heard. At a citizen's request, the board's approval, a speaker may readdress a topic. The board may exercise discretion in permitting or limiting readdressing. The board determines how much time to allocate to public comment after considering factors to include, but not limited to, the number of citizens offering to comment, the length of the agenda, or the length of the meeting time. The board may choose to use a timer to set a predetermined length of time to ensure fair access to the public comment by all identified speakers. And we will have time clock tonight, is that correct? So for tonight's meeting, each citizen shall be provided 3 minutes to speak. You will be giving a 30-second warning and then asked to stop at the end of 3 minutes. You can, after everyone else makes comments, if you want to speak again, you can go back up and speak again. You would notice that we have one of our officers here tonight in the event there are any disruptions. I do hope we do have a calm, orderly, and respectful discussion this evening. However, if that is not the case, we will then follow a proper procedure to stop the interrupting behavior, which can include potential prosecution for violating the law. With that out of the way tonight, you will hear from PFM and York Water Company and anything else that residents want to address. And I want to remind, I heard something earlier from someone that this whole process started, the township, we invited PFM to pursue the sale. We weren't solicited by PFM on this whole process.
Sir, there's 15 people outside.
Can they hear me?
I don't know.
I mean, there was room for them to come in here.
We pushed our way out. Yeah. 150 people. So in the meetings, you have a bigger place. Tell them you have a bigger place.
With that being said, PFM will now present their presentation. One more thing. I know most people here aren't happy about this process. These people were asked by us, PFM was asked to provide, to find a bidder for us. York Water was identified as a qualified bidder. Just please, whether you agree with what they have to say or not, treat them with respect that you would want, one of your family members spoken to. That's all I ask. Thank you.
All right, well, good evening. Again, Scott Shear with PFM. So there are handouts. So I will be going over the handout that has the yellow and the blue writing on it. It will also be up on the TV as well. For this evening, what we want to do, we're going to go through our presentation first, kind of go through some of the highlights of the process that the board and the township have done to date, why the township was pursuing, or at least trying to explore this opportunity, a little bit about the use of the funds, or at least the preliminary use of the funds, and I will stress, so this process has been going on since early 2022. If the board does decide at a later date to move forward with the sale, there will be about a year time frame to really have a lot more public discussions about the final use of the proceeds. So what we're talking about tonight is a template, it's a framework and a path. It's not set in stone, and we're gonna go through these slides and talk about that a little bit more, but I just want everyone to know that what we're showing here as far as potential uses of the funds has not been voted on by the board, obviously, and there will be a lot more public process to come if the board chooses to go that way. Then, after I'm finished, York Water Company will present some information about their firm, about their company, the history, why they had interest in the system, their view of Newberry system, talk a little bit about the capital needs that they see, and then also a little bit more about rates, future rates as well. We will be talking about that too. And then we will open it up for question and answers for both BFM and York Water, and just general questions. So with that, the first maybe start out with the team. So again, this was not an individual or one firm moving this forward. This was definitely a team approach. Obviously, the township was very instrumental in this from an administration standpoint. We have Tony Miller, manager, and Brent Zeiter, the wastewater treatment coordinator, as well as a lot of the time and effort that the board has put into this exploration process as well. We have the township solicitor, who's also here, James Sanders, the township engineer, Bill Rudy from Pinoni. I'm not sure if he's in the audience anywhere or not, and then Garrett Moore and myself. So again, this was definitely a team effort with all the different expertise, legal, engineering, financial, to help make sure we're looking at all different aspects of this as the township explores the opportunity. Next slide. So as far as why the township is exploring the sale, so we have a little pinwheel. At a high level, kind of just like the water side, the township decided to partner with an investor-owned utility on the water side many years ago. This is kind of the same concept, partnering with an outside company that is able to bear more resources, has the kind of the bandwidth to handle all the challenges currently as well as going forward as well. The system has been run very well to date, and we'll talk about that. There are obviously capital needs of the system. Whether the township keeps the system or sells the system, there's clearly capital and investments that need to be made in. But again, the township's looking for a partner to move this forward at a cost-effective manner, again, to be able to spread cost around a bigger rate base. Also allows township officials to focus more on other core or essential needs of the township. Right now, the township does spend a fair amount of time, township administration, on sewer-related items. So again, this will allow them to focus on other aspects of running the township, and then ultimately to provide for kind of a very financially solvent township going forward and provide for a good quality of life for the residents. And then again, we'll talk more about this, but right now, and historically, when you look at the financials of the township, they have been running deficits, have not been able to do a lot of the initiatives that they wanted to do, more or less kind of going paycheck to paycheck, not being able to do everything that was kind of in their purview to do. So again, we're going to hit on the different things on the right-hand side as far as possible uses or other reasons why. Again, help mitigate the need for future tax increases, focus on other core governments, partnering, as I mentioned, with an established utility provider. One thing we're going to talk more about is establishing a rate stabilization fund or a customer benefit fund. So there has been preliminary discussions to look at putting some amount of money aside if the sale moves forward to help subsidize the rates of the sewer users. And then there will be general proceeds that will be used to generate substantial investment earnings to be used for various capital needs of the township and for other budget initiatives and to pay off all the township debt. So as far as kind of the high transaction, so what we're looking to sell, or at least exploring and seeing what kind of interest is out there, is the township sewer system. And that's comprised of the wastewater treatment plant that treats a portion of the township residents as well as some of Goldsboro Borough. There are 12 pump stations that are included in this, all the underground service lines, and all the rights and obligations of all the various contracts and municipal agreements. So that's kind of what we're talking about, and that's all laid out in the documents, the bidding documents that were drafted during this bidding process. What is not being sold is what we call the Township Act 537 plan. And basically, that will stay with the township, and that's what the township will have to continue to do and keep up to date when it comes to connecting new users to the system. It basically has control of the economic development within the township. So that stays with the township. That is not being sold. No employees will lose their job. They will all be offered employment by the buyer, subject to their normal hiring process, screening process. And again, like the water rates that many of the residents pay, those rates, just like the wastewater rates, if the township decides to sell, would be governed and controlled by the Pennsylvania PUC. As far as a high-level overview of the timeline, so as I mentioned, it started back in early 2022. The yellow circles on this timeline represent the public meetings where different action was taken. The blue lines, blue circles were just kind of other milestone dates and events that occurred throughout this process. And there were some other, these were just kind of some of the key ones, but there were other meetings obviously throughout this process as well. But if we start from the left and go over to the right, again, January of 2022 was when the board approved the solicitor to draft an RFP to start looking at this process to procure ultimately what was our firm. In February is when we came in, February 2022, and did our initial presentation. In May 17th is when we went through the process. We had to do our own due diligence, came up with our own preliminary evaluation of the system, and presented that to the board. And then later in May, we were approved to move forward actually with the procurement process. So the initial aspect of our due diligence was just to make sure we had a good handle on the assets, what that preliminary evaluation was, to see if it even made sense or not to move forward with this extensive process. So then the board did decide to move forward on May 24th. We then released an RFQ, a request for qualifications, June of last year. So we sent this RFQ to about 150 or so different market participants across the nation, those that we know have interest in this kind of asset. We received the results of that RFQ back on July 18th. And then at the end of July is when we gave the public presentation to the board. We then shortlisted a few of the bidders those that submitted the bid, and when we say we shortlisted them, we then allowed them to have access to all the data that we had, and then we brought them into Newberry at the end of August to conduct what we call management meetings, where we would sit down with them and kind of go through sort of the financial aspect, the business aspect of the system, and then they also went on tour of the pump stations and the treatment plant to get to better know, as for the township, to get to know the prospective bidders more, and for the prospective bidders to get to know the asset of the township as well. So then basically from September of last year until spring of this year is when the team was doing still a lot of due diligence. We were doing our own due diligence, drafting documents, and doing a lot of analyses. The pre-qualified bidders were doing extensive analysis as well. And then in February of this year is when the board authorized us to release the request for bid, or the RFP. So basically when we sent out the RFP, it was the same exact document that the various pre-qualified bidders, they all had access to the same exact information. They were all bidding on the same exact document so that we could be able to compare apples to apples and report back to the board. So in March of this year, when we released the RFP, and then we received the RFP results May 11th and had our initial presentation at the end of May. So again, those were kind of the highlights of the process. Because of the kind of the complexity of this asset, of this kind of system, it takes a while for the township team to understand exactly what's going on from an engineering standpoint, from a financial, from a legal. And then also it takes the bidders quite a bit of time as well to make sure they're up to speed so they can do their due diligence and put in what they perceive as a good bid as well. So that's what's transpired here to date. Gary, if you can go to the next page. So the summary of the results, and we presented this at one of the prior public meetings, but at a high level, you see the 3 different companies that submitted. So we have a bid from Aqua, from Pennsylvania American, and then from York Water Company. So it's important to note that the purchase price, so we're going to be talking throughout the presentation about purchase price and also about indicative or estimated rates. The purchase price that the bidders submitted, that's binding. That will not change. The indicative rates that the bidders have submitted and we've been presenting, those are subject to change. So the rates are ultimately governed by the PUC. So the investor-owned utilities, companies like York Water, Aqua, Pennsylvania American, they can go request what kind of rate change that they're looking to the PUC, but ultimately, again, it's up to the PUC to make their changes to it and ultimately award what the PUC deems as appropriate from a rate increase perspective. And we'll hear more about it from York Water Company as well. But Aqua had bid $32.5 million, PA American bid $48 million. York Water Company submitted 2 bids, one for $53 million and one for $30 million, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. We also asked for bids with a guaranteed 2-year rate freeze, meaning the rates would not change from the current rates for at least 2 years. York Water Company, they submitted their proposal based on that 2-year rate freeze, and we'll show more projections. So again, from the kind of going through that whole exploration process and the due diligence, the ultimate bids came in here ranging basically from the 30 million and change up to 53 million, the high bid being from York Water Company. Slide looks at the indicative rates, and here we just put the various projections from all the different bidders kind of side by side, so you can see where they all shake out between Aqua and Pennsylvania American and York Water. Basically, what this is showing is of the 3 different companies that submitted their bids, York Water Company's rates were the lower of the various bidders. So York Water Company had the highest purchase price, but they also had the lowest overall indicative rates. And again, we'll be able to.
What color is each? Because I can't read it from here. I don't have it.
Aqua is the green line, both the solid green and the dotted line. Pennsylvania American is the yellow line, and then York Water Company is the 2 different shades of blue, one being dotted and one being solid.
They look cheaper.
Garrett, next slide, please. So if the township decided to move forward, now here's where we start looking at the potential use of proceeds and what kind of dollar amounts the township will have to redeploy here township-wide. So on the left-hand side, and this is assuming the York Water bid of $53 million. So on the left-hand side, we have the sources that we're going to start with, which would be the purchase price of $53 million. There is also about $8.5 million of cash on hand, sewer cash on hand, that will become available at closing as well. So basically, we're looking at about $61.5 million that the township will be able to redeploy at closing. And again, if this transaction would move forward, the closing would occur probably at the earliest a year from now. So there's a lot of work that needs to get done going through the PUC process. So it's not, it wouldn't close next month. It really will take a year or even longer to get to closing. So on the day of closing, we would have to pay off the sewer debt, about 1.5 million, pay off other township liabilities and the transaction fees related to this, which were estimated about 3.4 million for that line item. So total uses at closing would be about 4.9 million, which leaves the township a little over 56 million to then redeploy as they see fit after public meetings would occur. So starting with that premise of basically 56 million, we get to the next slide of what are some of the potential use of those proceeds. And again, knowing these are potential, these are preliminary, the board has not had any real public discussion about this, only because we need to get through this process first, and then ultimately see if the township wants to move forward with the sale. So a couple of the main items. Number one, elimination of township debt obligations. So the township does have other debt. That would be paid off early on. That's about $4 million, so the township would then be debt-free. Obviously, there'd be no more sewer debt, but then there'd be no other debt related to the township as well. Also fund pension and OPEB liabilities. So I think we all know what pension liabilities are. OPEB are other post-employment benefits, which is basically retiree health care. So we want to make sure those plans are funded and that they're at levels that make sense. That's something that we would spend a lot of time with the township's actuary to make sure we have all the numbers correct, but basically looking to fund those various liabilities. And so what happens when, obviously if you pay off debt, there's going to be freed up expenses in the budget. If you pay off or fund pension and OPEB liabilities, that also reduces expense line items in the budget that the township can then utilize for other items, which we'll talk a little bit more about. Another concept that we've talked a little bit about is establishing this customer benefit fund or rate stabilization fund. So there could be a substantial amount of money that the township would put in that fund, and right now, well, you'll see a slide later on in here that we're assuming $11 million of the sale proceeds would go into this customer benefit fund that would be used to subsidize the sewer rates maybe for the next 15 or 20 years, depending on the various models that we're using, and ultimately if the township decides they want to do that, how much they want to fund, and again, what assumptions. So there is a good chunk of those proceeds that would be there solely just for the sewer users to help mitigate any future rate increases that would come down the line. Then there would be a substantial amount in general reserves, and in that general reserve, there would be kind of sub-accounts that would be kind of earmarked for facilities and major equipment, fire services, parks, open space, stormwater, and other transportation-related projects. Obviously, a lot of road paving, no more of the chip and tar, but actually doing it, kind of the real paving. So the way, again, this would work, and get more into this in the slides, is we're going to be paying off liabilities, or funding liabilities. That's going to free up money in the budget, and then with a substantial amount of money being put in reserves, and these reserves are meant to be in perpetuity. So they're not going to be depleted 5 years from now or 20 years from now, as far as everything from the general reserve down. There would be legislation approved by the township that we'll talk about that does a very good job of keeping that money around for, again, a very, very long time. And the interest earnings off of those funds would be used to fund capital needs in those various areas, or other things that the township may do within their budget. And so this slide here kind of recaps, highlights what I just mentioned, that based on kind of those two main buckets, there's the savings bucket by paying off the debt and funding the pensions and the OPEB liabilities. By doing that, that's going to save the township about $880,000 a year, again, by reducing or eliminating the debt and the debt service related to that, as well as the ongoing annual obligations with the MMO for the pensions and the OPEB. Then the other bullet point where it says approximately 1.1 million of annual interest earnings, that again, substantial amount of money put in these reserves for these capital needs of the township-wide projects, open space, parks funding, road paving, whatever it may be. Assuming a conservative interest rate, that's going to generate about $1.1 million. So we're looking in total about a positive impact of about $2 million on an annual basis. It's not a one-time, but it's ongoing, again, for a very, very long time that the township will be able to use. And so to put that $2 million in context on how that kind of compares to the township's current budget, if we just look at the taxes that are currently levied, currently the budgeted real estate tax for 2023 generates about $2.1 million. The realty transfer tax is about $325,000. The earned income tax generates about $2.19 million and about $173,000 for local service tax. So those total taxes, not including the fire tax, generate about $4.8 million annually. And so again, the annual benefit, financial benefit to the township, if the board does decide to move forward with this, is about $2 million, or about 40% of the overall taxes that are levied. So again, this is meant to be kind of a very, very long-term investment into the township, and these funds are meant to last a very long time to be able to continue to do these projects and enhance the township. Gary, next slide. So just to dive a little bit deeper into sort of those two buckets that I mentioned about the savings and the investment earnings. So eliminating the township's debt, almost $300,000 of annual budgetary savings, funding the pensions, about $550,000 of annual savings, and then funding the township's OPEB liability, about $50,000 or so of annual budgetary savings. And that's what gets us close to that $880,000, $900,000 of annual benefit by paying off and reducing those liabilities. Then as far as the investment earnings and the reserves that are being set up, again, the main intention is to be used for capital needs, but it can be used for other items that the board deems appropriate. Based on the 3% interest earnings, again, that's going to generate over $1 million. We're estimating $1.1 million. Today, if the township had that money, it'd be closer to $2 million instead of $1.1 million. So again, we're conservatively estimating what that interest income would be on an annual basis. And the key thing is these funds will be here for generations to come in perpetuity. The board, if they decide to move forward with the sale, will then ultimately entertain a resolution or legislation on kind of how to safeguard that money. And so there's ideas out there that your solicitor has that will protect that as legally possible. So we ran kind of a lot of models to show kind of the financial impact to this, but one of the key things that we also wanted to do was to illustrate that if the township keeps the system, the rates will be going up as well. So we feel that that is important to look at as well. The rates are going to be going up if the township sells the system, but if the township keeps the system, again, rates will be going up too. And so here, this just shows the kind of estimated quarterly rates going out about 10 years. Right now, the quarterly rate is about 100.
You got more pamphlets?
No. So,
This is the important piece that we all want to find out,
so the current rates right now, the current quarterly rates are about $149 a quarter. And so by the end of the term, basically on 2033, we're showing quarterly sewer rates about $215. And these projections assume that the township will be investing in capital into the system to the tune of about $9 or $10 million over this time horizon. So again, it's a very capital intensive asset. The next decade, we're looking at around $9 million going into the system. If the system is held longer, there will be even more investments needed. But again, this just gives you an idea that the rates will be going from projections from about $149 per quarter up to about $215 per quarter. So to give you an idea of the customer benefit fund that I mentioned.
Scott, can you hold on? Could you please, everyone be quiet so everyone can hear him speak? You were doing really well for the rest of the presentation. All this information is on the township website. You can print out also. Okay,
So the,
Is this online that we could bring it up on our phone?
it's on the website, correct?
Nope, it's not. Right, I know what.
if it's not on the website, it won't be on the website.
No.
So here's an example of the customer benefit fund. So if at closing, the township would decide to put $11 million aside, I'm not saying this is what they would do, this is just an example, that this fund right now, based on various estimates, would last about 20 years. And so what this is showing is the red line is what the rates would look like if the township kept the system. The yellow line is an estimate of what the rates could look like under York Water ownership. And even though this is a 20-year fund, this one here, we're only just going out 10 years, just to make things not so small. The blue line then is basically what the net rate would look like after the annual subsidy that the sewer users would receive. So you're seeing in the green bars, in 2026, the sewer users would roughly receive about a $281 subsidy for that year. The next year, about $149. Out in 2032 and 33, we're looking at about $488 for that year, $420, $352. So again, this large chunk of money would be put into that fund, and then on an annual basis would be basically rebated back. Some amount would be rebated back to the sewer users, again, to help subsidize those rates over, again, a long period of time, to kind of gradually get those up to where York Water rates would be at that point in time.
Never give money back.
So over that time period, the average user would realize about a $4,000 benefit over that 20-year period with the subsidy. So the other thing that we wanted to highlight were some of the benefits and considerations of a potential sale of the township's wastewater system. So on the left-hand side in the blue, some of the benefits. So we have a cash infusion into the township that can be used for the benefit of both township residents overall, as well as specifically to just the sewer users. So the township has that right, the ability to have those discussions to see how they want to allocate those funds. Number two, overall efficiencies, selling to an experienced operator who has the resources to effectively and efficiently manage more of the mandates and consent orders coming down the pipe. Risk mitigation eliminates the township's risk of future state or federal mandates being enacted that would be costly or burdensome, and also administrative relief, again, allow the township to focus on other responsibilities. Some of the considerations on the right-hand side, loss of local control. So concern that a sale of the system would result in a far-off company running Newberry Township's system. And we'll have some points on the next slide that kind of explains these a little bit more. Increase in the sewer rates. The concern that the sale of the system will prove to be more costly to the township residents, and we'll talk more about that. Loss of township employees. Concern that the dedicated, long-time employees of the system will not have a job. Quality of service concerns. Concern that another company will not have the same quality of care as if Newberry Township kept the system. And then loss of local accountability. Concern that if something goes wrong, residents will not have the ability to address their concerns or frustration with the appropriate persons or bodies. So then the next slide, we kind of pick each one of those considerations and we look at them a little bit closer. And again, we're going to hear some more about this once York Water Company speaks. But as far as loss of local control, so York Water Company, as its name has been located downtown York for over 200 years. So very close by, 13 miles, 20 minutes away from York. So again, a very close company. Increase in the sewer rates. Yes, it is projected that the rates will be higher with an investor-owned utility, and even with York Water, with their estimates, with the capital that they foresee putting in the system. And again, we'll hear a little bit more about that. But we feel that the Customer Benefit Fund will do a very good job of mitigating those rate increases for a long time. Loss of township employees that was stipulated in the agreement that the bidders were bidding on, where all the employees were going to be required well, they were all offered employment, again, up to, in this case, York Water Company's screening process. And it's important to note that, you know, the employees, and again, York Water will speak about this, about how important the employees are and how valuable they are, and why they would want them to come over to the company. Quality of service concerns, again, York Water Company is very heavily regulated by the PUC, so we'll hear a little bit more about that. And then loss of local accountability, again, York Water is very close, office is staffed, normal daytime business hours, and emergency 24/7 as well. So estimated timeline going forward. So this evening we have our town hall. The board could consider this tomorrow night, or they could consider it at their July 25th meeting as whether or not they want to proceed or not with this transaction. If they did decide to proceed, then we have their closing would occur about 12 to 15 months after that vote. So in closing, before I turn it over to York Water, you know, again, the team went through a very thorough exploration process, did the due diligence, put the bid out to market participants across the country. The board spent a lot of time looking at this information, the administration and the rest of the team, obviously the pre-qualified bidders, and ultimately York Water Company has spent a lot of time on this. With the purchase price of $53 million, the goals and the various ideas that the township have could be accomplished with that purchase price. Some of the key components, as we talked about, obviously York Water is very local, which you know has a lot of benefits related to it. The future rates would be set by the PUC, just like the residents' current water rates are, again governed by the Pennsylvania PUC. And again, these funds would be used not for short-term fixes, but meant to be here for very long-term in perpetuity, both to benefit the township residents all across the township, as well as mentioned, specifically the Customer Benefit Fund would be solely there for the sewer users as well for a very long time. So with that, I will turn it over to York Water Company, and then after that, we will open it up for
I might ask for it back. So let's everybody stretch their legs real quick. I know that was kind of a long presentation. Go ahead and stretch your legs out just a little bit. Good evening, everyone. My name is JT Hand, and I have the privilege of being the president and CEO of the York Water Company. And I want to just commend all of you for the manner in which you have attended tonight, and for the way that you have behaved this evening. I know it's early. I know it's early. I thought it was the second row I had to worry about. But it really is a credit to all of you, and it is so important to this process that you are here tonight. So I really do commend you for how you have engaged in this process. You may not like everything you've heard tonight. You may not agree with everything you hear tonight, but the opportunity to have civil discourse in a township like Newberry is uncommon in today's day and age, so you're to be commended. As I said, my name is JT Hand. I am the 22nd President and CEO of the York Water Company in the company's 207 years of history. And I'm joined tonight in the front row by Alex Shiratini, who is the York Water Company's Chief Administrative Officer and General Counsel, by Matt Poff, who is the company's Chief Financial Officer, and by Vaughn Wenger, who is the Superintendent of all of our wastewater operations. If the township decides to move forward with this transaction, the York Water Company is looking for partnerships. That's the way we do business. We do business as partners. Communicating transparently, openly, and often. That's the only way these transactions work, is when there's communication. If the township decides to move forward with this transaction, I am absolutely sensitive to the fact that many of you, maybe all of you, will be my customers. And I'm very sensitive to how you are treated through this process, so that when you are customers of the York Water Company, you are similarly treated with the respect you deserve as a ratepayer of the York Water Company. I know you're anxious to get to your public comments, so I'm going to go through my presentation relatively quickly to give you a chance at the microphone. I apologize if the slides are, maybe some of the fonts a little bit small. I'm sorry, I didn't know we were going to have this set up, so I'll try to explain it as I go through. And if you could just go to that next slide there. I'm going to read this for you because you may not be able to see it in the back, and clearly the ones that are outside the door cannot see it. I start with the mission statement of the York Water Company, which is, the York Water Company is committed to providing our customers safe, dependable, high-quality water, wastewater, related services that meet or exceed customer expectations, reasonable rates, an environment encouraging dedicated employees to achieve their highest standards of performance while ensuring a fair return for our shareholders. We've got a three-legged stool up there. Those are just three of our stakeholders. We have a lot of stakeholders. Obviously, the township has a lot of stakeholders. But the three stakeholders that support our stool is the communities that we serve, the customers that we serve, and the shareholders that invest in our company. Together, they form the foundation of our stool. We have other stakeholders. The employees of a company are our stakeholders. The natural environment is a stakeholder. All of the individual communities and all of the elected officials of those communities and all of our regulators are all stakeholders of the company. And we work hard every single day to balance the need of all of our stakeholders, recognizing that what's good for one is not necessarily always good for the other. But in balance, you can take care of all your stakeholders. These two side-by-side pictures, and kind of the title there, the importance of place. We are the York Water Company. For those of you who came tonight thinking that you were going to be addressed by a multinational corporation doing business out of France, I'm here to tell you we are the York Water Company. We're the oldest continuously operating business in all of York County. Nobody has been in business longer than the York Water Company. We have been in business for 207 years. For 207 years, we've been serving the needs of our communities. For 207 years. We're the longest continuously paying taxpayer in all of York County. No one has paid taxes longer than the York Water Company. There are churches who have been in existence, but they are not businesses, and churches do not pay taxes. I know there is a concern amongst many of you about losing local control, not having a local presence. As has already been suggested, our downtown York headquarters is 13 miles away. It's where my office is. It's where Matt's office is. It's where Alex's office is. And it's where Vaughn is dispatched out of. It's 13 miles. I know it's not next door, but we are a local company governed by local leadership, and have been. We are very proud. We are an investor-owned utility, and I know that gives some of you pause. Some of you have paused that we are an investor-owned utility and that we are beholden solely to our investors. That is not true. We do have the distinction of having the longest consecutive dividend streak of any corporation in the United States of America. The whole country. No one has issued dividends to our investors longer than the York Water Company. For 207 years. We are founded by frugal Dutch. We started our company to respond to a community need in 1816 that they did not know how they were going to put out fires that were consuming Yorktown at the time. It was local leadership that jumped in at that time to take responsibility to form this company to respond to a community need. And we have been responding to a community need for 207 years. Place absolutely matters to us, and we're very, very proud to be part of the York community. Just for context, in York County, and I know that's really hard to see, and I apologize for that. And, the outline there is York County. So if you're familiar with the geography, the outline is York County. And if you see everything there in the blue, that is our territory. That's where the Public Utility Commission allows us to serve, authorizes us to serve in York County. We currently serve a total of 53 different municipalities across 3 counties in south central Pennsylvania. But it's 53 municipalities that we serve. And all that service basically starts in York, Pennsylvania. You can see as you get up towards Newberry Township, we have the ever so slightest slice of water service already in Newberry Township. Very slight, but we have managed to cross the border. The rest of the services as displayed up there. And these slides will be available if the board wants them to be available. Obviously, we'll provide them. You can post them after the meeting this evening so you can have a chance to go into a little bit more detail. Talk about customer service and the importance of customer service. And again, I apologize for that chart over on the right corner there. So I'm just going to walk you through it, okay? The higher it is, the worse it is. The higher the chart, the worse the chart. Way down in the lower left corner, there's a number that says 0.0%. 0.0% is the complaint rate of formal complaints levied against the York Water Company per 1,000 customers that we serve. We have the lowest customer complaint rate of any of the regulated utilities in Pennsylvania. The lowest of any of them, compared to the average, which is that higher bar there, of a little bit over 12%. Why? Because we are local, because we are present, because we are in downtown York, because any customer that wants to talk to the president and CEO of the utility can walk through our door and have a conversation with me. You will not find that if you talk to Comcast. You will not find that if you talk to the gas company. You will not find that if you talk to the electric company. But you will find that with the York Water Company. And we welcome you to come talk to us. The other reason is because of our rate structure. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more as we get down. We do offer our customers low-income assistance programs to help offset the rates for both their water and their wastewater services. We are staffed in downtown York, physically staffed in downtown York, where you can talk to a human being, either face-to-face or on the phone, if you have a question about your utility service, and you can transact your business either face-to-face or remotely if you choose. As I said, we are local, 24/7 operations, emergency dispatch, and it all does start in York, Pennsylvania. I know experience is important to all of you. I'm going to give a shout out to the existing team, okay? To the existing team of employees from the township who have been running the system. They've been doing a good job. They should be very, very proud of themselves. They should be proud of themselves. What the York Water Company does, it multiplies upon that. It is a multiplier upon the experience that they have and what they've done for your system. We bring the additional resources, the additional competencies, the additional staff, the additional contract, and the additional capital to help make sure that utility service is available for the township and all of the customers of the township not just today, but for multi-generational opportunity. We currently operate 11 wastewater systems. We're supported by a team of in-house and contract engineers. Everything that we do is basically monitored through our supervisory control and data acquisition network. So remote monitoring, digital technology, using technology to help us improve the efficiency of all of our systems. We have similar systems to the Newberry Township system, and specifically the intermunicipal agreements which are in place right now between Newberry, Goldsboro, NISA. We have similar situations already in place, so we're very, very familiar with how those bulk interconnects work and the contractual obligations and responsibilities for all those contracts. As I said, we are very familiar with the current operation of the system and how it works. As far as asset management, we have a 1% strategy. 1%. That is, we replace 1% of our assets every year. That's 1% of the pipe, that's 1% of the pumps, that's 1% of the services, 1% every year. So what does that mean? That's a 100-year life cycle, right? It's a 100-year life cycle if you think about it. That investment, it takes capital. It takes capital, and the older the system, the more capital it takes. And that's one of the challenges with the existing system. It's not that the system is not fine today. It is that the capital is not available today to take care of the future needs based upon the current regulatory environment and the degradation of the assets in a very, very harsh wastewater environment. So I'm going to use this roof as an example. A lot of homeowners here. Many of you have had to put a new roof on. And maybe you put a new roof on 10 years ago. And maybe you thought that that roof was going to last you 20 years. And you were hoping it was going to last you for 20 years. That's the Newberry system. The Newberry system was installed and is starting to show its wear and tear. And the challenge is that even though if you look at the balance sheet today for Newberry, you think that it's solvent for the next 25 years or whatever that might be, the challenge is you haven't put enough money aside to take care of the roof. 10 years ago you put the roof on, and every month you have not been putting the money aside so that 20 years later you can replace the roof. And the assets of the township need to be replaced. And the cost to replace those assets in 2023 and beyond dollars is much higher than what the cost was when the roof was first put on 10 years ago. So you are underfunded in the capital side to be able to take care of the demands of the system. And that is a challenge. One just very, very small example, and you can't really see it up here, and it's the Grandview pumping station. Very small. Anybody live next to the Grandview pumping station? Okay, there you go. Fantastic. So that Grandview system, 33 years old. Put in ground 33 years ago. It's got an auto dialer with it. So the auto dialer helps to tell when there's an alarm or an issue with that pumping station. The pumps that run that, the grinders that run that, replacing that pumping station, it is fully depreciated today. To replace that pumping station is $175,000. $175,000 to replace that pumping station. You have 12 of those. And unfortunately, the capital does not exist right now in your reserve to be able to take care of those pumping stations. Not to mention the lines, the pipes, and the treatment plant itself. And that is really the challenge that the township's going to have. Talking about capital investment. You see up on the right-hand side, it's hard to see the ASCE, American Society of Civil Engineers, Infrastructure Report Card for wastewater. This is across the entire United States of America. We as Americans are at a D+ for our investment in wastewater infrastructure. You see this and you hear this all the time. Whether you're driving down the road, whether you're using municipal services, whether you're a customer of electric or gas or anyone else, whether you're driving across the bridges, you know that we are challenged on infrastructure because there's just never enough money. On the wastewater side, we are rated as a nation at a D+. From the York Water Company perspective, what are we doing about that? We are investing in our infrastructure. We're investing in our infrastructure to make sure it's available for the next generation of customers. You see that 2023 investment of $60 million. That's $60 million of investment across our 53 municipalities for our 80,000 water and wastewater connections. That is the cost of capital that's necessary to make sure that we can take it from a D+, and the York Water Company systems are at an A. There's a cost to do that. I understand that. There's a cost. But there's also assurance behind that. The utility will be available when you need it. We focus on resiliency, redundancy, reliability, and sustainability. What does that mean? That means no single point of failure. One example of an existing single point of failure, I'm going to go back to that pumping station. For the gentleman that lives next to the pumping station, how often has the backup power generator kicked on for that pumping station? Hasn't kicked on because there isn't one. There is no backup power generation at that pumping station or any of the other pumping stations. Actually, I take that back. I think one of them does have a backup generator. That's a single point of failure. You lose power, you lose that pumping station, which isn't a big deal in a short time. But if you lose power for a long period of time, that pumping station is going to fail. All of our pumping stations have backup power generation to ensure we have no single points of failure. That's just one very, very small example. I don't want to bore you with the capital improvements that we've done throughout our facilities across our entire footprint. Again, suffice it to say that for this system, Newberry Township system, the estimate is $1.5 to $2.5 million in additional capital every year for the next 5 years, and that's just for the next 5 years. And that's based upon the company's initial assessment. $1.5 to $2.5 million capital investment each year to start bringing the system up to necessary wastewater standards. It is a significant investment, and we have the capacity to be able to do that. We have the technology and the expertise to be able to do that. I know this is the slide that you really want to see. I know this is it. This is the crux of the situation, right? And so for the folks in the back, can you see that, or is it too small? Okay. So I'm gonna, if you don't mind, I'm gonna kind of talk down through the slide. Top left corner, coming on down, year 1, year 2. It should show. Year 1, year 2 is $596. That's your rate for the first 2 years. As Scott mentioned, our bid, held the rates for 2 years. So we guaranteed holding the rates for those 2 years. The other bidders did not do that. The York Water Company did. Year 3.